Hello, my YouTube family and friends. I pray that everyone is having a beautiful, blessed Monday in the mighty name of Jesus. If you have not said it already, let's say it together. Thank you, Jesus, for another day. It is indeed a blessing to be alive. Yes, it is. Thank Him, y'all. It's a blessing to be above ground. To be up above ground. Nobody's planning your funeral. Nobody's planning my funeral. We are alive. And let's be thankful in every day that God allows us to wake up. So I wanted to hop on here. There were separate things I wanted to discuss or share on this platform today. The other one I may share on tomorrow. It has to do with I want to share what happened to a family member, so someone else can be encouraged and they can praying that they'll be freed from that situation that my family member went through. But tonight I want to. This just came in my spirit. But let me read first. Let me read Psalm 23. So it reads, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not be in want." And then I want to go down to, that's verse 1, but I want to go down to verse 4, and it says, "I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And so I shared this, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, but I wanted to just reference that scripture because it says so much just in those scriptures there. But, I often wonder, how can somebody that has way more than you, how can they be jealous of you? You say, well, they got way more than I got, or it seems they do. It seems they do. In the physical realm, it seems like they do, but in the spiritual, that maybe they don't have anything, because I've shared that as well, and it's true. If you don't have Jesus, you might as well have nothing, because with Him you got everything, but without Him you have nothing. And I've shared this before on this platform. The poorest person in the world is not the one without money, it's the one without Jesus. And a lot of people, I don't think they totally grasp that. But think about that. If you can have the finest cars, the finest home, clothes, coming out your closet. You got jewelry, you got change, you got your hair's in the latest hairstyle, you got money in the bank. You got so much money you don't know what to do with it. You can have all of that, boats, ships, travel all over the country, but if you don't have Jesus, you have nothing. You have absolutely zero. You might as well just not have any of that, because see, unless you have Him, you just without. You're lacking. You're really lacking. And like I said, I don't believe a lot of people that are wealthy, they understand that. I don't think sometimes the Lord has to put us down to rock bottom before, just knock us in the head, literally, and on the ground before we can, He can get our attention. We got to lose everything. Take it from me. Take it from me. He did me like that. Until he got to get your attention some kind of way. He don't want you to perish, but He said, "I'm being patient with you. I'm giving you my grace and my mercy." They knew every day. And like I said, a lot of people, I don't feel like they understand that. They totally, and even if you ain't even got to be rich. It's just the fact you got stuff. Stuff got you. And I've been around so many people. I'm 51, but I've been around so many people all of my life. Family members. I've been on jobs where people got way more than me. They are supervisor, they are manager, they are director, and they worried about what I got. They worried about what kind of car I had. Now, there was this one, there's several different times, but when I worked, the one in particular that stands out to me is when I worked the job. I worked for 3 years that I resigned from in Tennessee before we came here, and I remember, y'all, it had got so bad where I had this thing where, cause like everybody in the office was so close knit. It was like trying to think, it was like 8 or 9 of us in that office, but we were all in different areas. And then the area I was in the back. So we had like a long hallway from the front door to the back. So we were by the kitchen area, whatever. But it was, let me think, it was 3, 4, it was 4 of us back there, I think, 4 or 5 of us. So we were sort of close knit, but you know, they had it strategically, you know, we didn't have cubicles, but they had the desks where they were, you know, we had enough room to walk around, but it was still tight. But anyway, you know, it had gotten to the point where, you know, they would pay attention, because I had this thing. So, you know, I was just, you know, some days they would just be on getting on my nerves so bad. And of course, this is when I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. But not making an excuse, but I was going to church, I was doing all of that, but they just got on my nerves sometimes so bad. And you know, I was all prayed out. You know, I was all prayed up and prayed out. And I'm like, Lord, please help me. But he didn't want me, something in my eye, y'all. He didn't want me to bring me out. He wanted me to help them, you know, to pray for them, to encourage them. And that's what I did, it to the best of my ability. But it seemed like they just didn't want it. Like they enjoyed being how they were, you know, acting crazy and just not ungodly. But anyway, when I started taking my lunch, you know, pretty late. So I take my lunch like 2:30, something like that. Cause I was like, oh, I used to tell my late husband, I said, I just need to get out of there. And I only took it for 30 minutes, but I would go to the McDonald's, which was like right across the street, or I would go to the Wendy's. It was a little bit down, you know, from the job. But y'all, it was just 30 minutes, but I just wanted to get away from there, just to come out and go back in to kind of refresh my mind. Now, keep in mind, I got off at 4:30, but I would take my lunch real late, just so it was almost time for me to go home. It was almost time for me to go home when I came back in there. So 3 o'clock, I had about an hour and 30 minutes to go. But anyway, it had gotten to where, you know, a lot of them, sometimes they wouldn't eat lunch. Sometimes if they did, you know, they'll, you know, share lunch or whatever. And so when I would come back in there, just silly, y'all, I would come back in there with my Wendy's or my McDonald's, and because sometimes I didn't have enough time to eat in the car, so I eat it like at my desk, you know. And I guess they'd be over there sniffing that food and stuff. And some of them, you know, some of them hadn't eaten lunch that day, because, you know, they'll make it be known, I ain't got no money, you know, my kids take all my money, you know, that poor mentality. And I'm like, you know, yeah, I got bills, but I'm gonna enjoy something out of my check. I'm gonna eat, you know, I'm gonna do something. So anyway, that was just how I was. But anyway, and I'm like, you know, you can get you something to eat if you're hungry. It ain't that much. But a lot of them, like I said, when you walking in that poor mentality, you know, that's where the enemy wants you to be, and that's where you're gonna stay. If that's where you want to be. And so anyway, I come back in there with my little food or whatever, and y'all, it'll be no more than $10 I would have spent, or sometimes maybe just a little less than that. And they, you know, wow, it must be nice to buy lunch, you know. And I'm like, what? You know, and then, you know, they make little comments or whatever, and I'm just like, and no, I think one time it was mentioned, it's the lady said, she said, yeah, I said, I can't afford to eat out like that, you know. So basically it was being implied that I was wasting money, you know, because I had the money to buy me something to eat with the money I worked for, hard for, because I had to deal with them. You know, that was part of the earning too. I had to deal with them. They demonic stuff that they was doing. So in addition to that, you know, then I'm working too, doing my actual work. But I'm like, I gotta tolerate y'all too. Yeah, I'm gonna enjoy myself. I'm gonna enjoy something, and so associated with this job. So anyway, it would be said, you know, mentioned a few times. Yeah, it must be nice, you know. I got bills to pay, because I was married at the time, but a lot of them were single. So, you know, they were sort of, I guess, struggling with bills or whatever. But I'm like, y'all, I've just never paid attention to people like that, to be that mindful of what they eating and, you know, trying to calculate, you know, that to me, I call that counting other people's money. And then, you know, there was a time also where it had gotten where they were paying attention to the car I was driving. Now, at the time, I had an Infiniti. It was an old Infiniti. I was like, I think it was 2015. Old car. But my late husband, he kept it shined up and stuff, whatever. And so it had gotten where I knew that they were nosy in the office. So even the manager, you know, and they, you know, they had, their cars weren't super nice, but I mean, they made more money than I made, you know, and stuff. And they, you know, they went on cruises and trips and stuff. I didn't do any of that, but I wasn't jealous of them. I had no type of, you know, jealousy in my heart with that. I didn't care, but they did care. They were watching what I had. And so I'm like, you know, I answer to you, I report to you. Why do you care what I drive? And so, and my late husband, he used to always say, because they need to know how mad they need to be at you. That's why. They got to see what you're driving, what you pulling up in. And so anyway, you know, like I said, it had gotten where, you know, a lot of times I would, well, a few of us would get off at the same time at 4:30. So we had to park in the garage, you know, at the hospital. So connect to the building we were in, and across the street from the building we were in. And so I'd be trying my best. Sometimes I try to act like I was doing something in the office so I could leave later, where I wouldn't have to walk out with them, because, you know, they had this thing, let's all walk out together. And a few times I did, but when I did actually walk out with them, just trying to save face, y'all, just trying to, you know, I was in my people pleasing spirit, because I didn't want them to see what kind of car I had. And my late husband said, so if they see it, they see it. So what, you know? And so anyway, because I think when I started the job, I don't think I had that car. I think I got it afterwards, I think. But anyway, I can't remember. I think that's what happened. So anyway, I was just, and not so much I was trying to hide the car, but I just didn't want a fuss made over it. That's what I was, you know, that's why I was going with that. But I would park way at the end. I knew where they parked at. So I parked way at the end, like, you know, where I knew they, you know, they parked closer to the, when they come off the elevator. I parked way at the end somewhere on another level. It still didn't work. And so I think one of them, they ended up seeing my car or whatever. And so they were making little remarks about it and stuff. So I'm thinking, why do you even care? You know, and then I'll never forget this. So this lady, she ended up, when she started working there, she was driving like a pickup truck. It was an old one, y'all. I mean, just old. It was like, it was just to get her to work and get her back home. And so, and she always referenced, you know, she would say, you know, that's how we, you know, I don't have a car note, you know, it gets me to A to B, from A to B, blah, blah. So, you know, nobody would really make a fuss out of it. So right before she ended up, because she didn't stay there real long, but right before she ended up leaving the job, of course, she left before I resigned in 2021, but right before she left, she ended up getting an Infiniti truck. And it was nice, y'all. It was so nice. It was so pretty. And so, you know, of course, I'm gonna be honest, you know, I don't want to get on here and lie, but I was looking, I was like, who truck is that? You know, because it stood out because it was so big and it was nice. And it wasn't a new one, but it was still nice. It didn't matter. And it was all, you know, pretty and shined up. And so she finally, you know, told everybody, she said, yeah, you know, I ended up getting me a truck, an Infiniti truck, blah, 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 you know, whatever. And I could already feel the jealousy, y'all, in the room. You know, she was a patient payment person just like I was. And she was older than me. But I could already feel, you know, it was just a silent type thing, you know, who she thinks she is, you know. And, of course, all of them had just little cars to get them from A to B. You know, they didn't have no fancy car. One lady, she would always say, you know, just like I said, a poor mentality. She would always come in there talking about her air didn't work, and, you know, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, and, you know, just always just a old me, old man mentality. Never nothing positive. Just, you know, just always down and out. Don't want to come up. They just want to be down so they can have something to complain about. And so anyway, it'll go in one ear of mine and go out the other. But the lady, y'all, she was so happy, and I could tell she just really wanted to be encouraged, and for somebody to say, oh, that's a nice truck. And I did. I told her, I said, that's nice, you know. And but it's like she didn't want me to say it was nice. She wanted to hear it from other people. See, she knew they was jealous of her, and she knew I wasn't. So anyway, you know, I was trying to make a fuss out of it, because I could tell, like I said, she was looking for somebody to compliment her, and it shouldn't be like that. But, you know, she was in a people pleasing place too, because it shouldn't have mattered, you know, if they liked it or if they didn't like it. Who cares? It's your car, and you the one got to pay the car note on it. But anyway, my whole point of sharing this video is that people can have more than you. You know, they can be in a higher position than you. They can, seem like they got a nicer home than you. Some people got a house. You ain't even got no house. You may stay with somebody. You may have a little, you know, apartment, whatever. But people, they jealous. They jealous of your joy. They jealous of your, how content you are. Because a lot of them know if they were in that situation, they would not be the way you are. They know that. And I'm gonna give a prime example. So when I was, when we were living with the lady at the church. Like, we only lived with her 3 months, but when we were living with her, yeah, I was a little, I wasn't content, for the most part. I wasn't, I'm not gonna lie. But then I became content because I said, okay, Lord, I got to learn my lesson through this. You teaching me something in this situation, to be thankful in all things. And a lady from church even said, so you got a place to stay? And I was like, I didn't want to hear that, because I'm like, I wanted her to tell me I can get my own place. She said, you got a place to live? And I said, yeah, you know what, that's true. So I said, Lord, please forgive me for being ungrateful. But during that time, when we first moved in with the lady, I was at work and I was telling different people and stuff. And y'all, I felt some type of way because I would talk to people. Of course, just about all of them had big houses or little houses or whatever. They had a house, and I'm like, here I am, 51 years old. But Jesus said, I got you. I'm going to take care of what's going on, but you got to trust me. You got to be content in your situation, And I ain't always had no house. Before we moved in the house that my late husband passed away in, and the one we moved from in 2022, we sold, we were living in apartments. We were living in duplexes. So, I haven't always had, nice things. We've had to struggle. We've had to, be in a place where we had to pray to God, help us. We want more. We desire more. Excuse me. But before the Lord blesses you with more, he got to make sure he can trust you with the little, so, and that's Bible. But again, we have to be content with what we have. But like I said, I've noticed that there were people in my family, I would always compliment them on what they had. They didn't want me to do that. They wanted me to be jealous of them. I had a family member, it was on my late husband's side, and they always posted their cars and stuff on Facebook, so everybody can applaud them and comment, oh, it's so pretty, oh, it's so nice. And my late husband used to say, you better not post nothing about us on there. I said, yeah, I'm not. He said, you better not. We just had that understanding. He said, you don't need to show nobody what you got. He said, you're blessed and you're better than blessed. You don't have to get nobody approval. And that's when I was struggling with that. And I heard him, but I still struggled with it. But I never did that. But on his family side, this particular family member, they always did that. It was just a showboat type of thing. Look at what I got. Look at what we got. Look at what my family got. And they tell every detail about the car or house or whatever it is. And then they give this big, long, how they came from this place. That's a testimony. But I feel like the line, there's a, what is it? It is a testimony of how God has blessed you, but it also can be, sort of a boastful type thing too. People that are struggling, they looking at that and they like, okay, the Lord has blessed you, but why you got to be so showy about it? There's a difference there. There's a difference in that, not being humble. And I used to tell my late husband all the time, I said, it's just a showy type spirit, and it was there, and I noticed it because I had it. I wanted it. I wanted it to be seen as well. So that's why I recognized what they were doing, because I was doing it too, but I was doing it in another way. But anyway, like I said, going back to this family member on his side, so I would, compliment them. I said, oh, that's, nice, whatever, or compliment them on one of their children or something. And y'all, it was like I didn't say anything. So that's how I knew, some people want you to be jealous of them. They want you to have envy of them. They want you to be envious of them, because they just want it to be like that. They don't want you to be saying that, they don't want to thank you for liking something they have or admiring something. They want that, division there. And I noticed that right away. So I just quit doing it. But then they want you, that's the enemy. The enemy don't want you to do it anymore, or they don't want you to do it anymore because they want you to be jealous. And I'm like, I don't care what you got. I have things too. God has blessed me with things too. But y'all, I have been around, like I said, so many family members. They have so much more, or have had so much more than me and my late husband. And when the kids were little, and we compliment them because that's where our heart was at. That's nice. That's a nice house. That's a nice this. That's a nice that. They don't even want to hear it, But somebody else said they all, grinning. They're grinning from one ear to the other, but they don't want to hear it from, the person they want. It's crazy, but they wanted me and my late husband to be jealous of them. We didn't even care because we had nice stuff too. And I think that was the thing. They didn't like that we were not showy. Hello, Nanny here, y'all. They didn't like that we were not being showboaty about our stuff. They didn't like that. So they like, okay, but that's called contentment. That's called, being okay. I don't have to do that because I know what I got. I know what God has blessed me with. So I'm good. That's what it was. That's what it was. So, but y'all, it's people around you. Be mindful of your circles. It's people around you that are jealous of you, that are hating on you. You say, well, why they hating on me? They got more than I got. No, they don't. You got more than they probably will ever have. Hopefully not ever have, because hopefully they're going to get to know Jesus before it's everlasting too late. But right now, you have more. You do have more. You do have more because you got Jesus in your heart. You got the love of Jesus, on you. You got favor on you. You got blessings upon you over and over and over. So that's where, that's what they're jealous of. And like I said, you can't befriend people when they hating on you and when they jealous of you, because, that's, you're inviting the enemy around you, because, you just got to pray for them. And that's what I did for years. My own parents, my own siblings, other family members, and it was always snide remarks, y'all don't made it, and we just had nice stuff. We just paid our bills. Some of the bills we struggled to pay. But on the outside looking in, it looked like we had it going on. But like I said, my late husband, he really liked nice cars. I didn't really care too much. I mean, I like riding in them, but I didn't care too much. He the one, he was the one that would study them and research them, and then next thing I know, they'd be in the driveway. But like I said, y'all, just be mindful of who around you. People that are over you, people at your church, people, on your job, people in your family. Just be mindful. Pay attention to the little comments they say. And like I said, I know I was guilty of that. Me and him used to say that. Say, why they hating on us? They car costs way more than our car. Or, we would just say little stuff like that. And, then the Lord revealed it to me. He said, it ain't about that. You got me. He said to me, he said, you had me. Even in, I didn't have a relationship with him, but I had him in my heart. And I knew how to treat people. I knew how to care for people. And I wanted to go the extra mile for people. And they didn't do that. So, they looking at us like, what's you like, what's going on there? That's what it was. Contentment. When you got contentment, it don't matter what. Somebody can pull up in a Lamborghini. Somebody can pull up in a Mercedes, and you can have a bike. You still content. You still content. And I thank the Lord for that, because he's brought me a mighty, mighty long way. There was a time, I was always trying to compare myself with other people. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. Because, see, Jesus is more than enough. He's everything I could ever need him to be. And, I just shared a video. He knows our needs even before we ask. So I don't have to want what nobody else got. I don't have to be jealous of what nobody got. I don't care what kind of house you live in. I don't care what kind of car you got. I don't care how much money you got in the bank, what kind of clothes you wear. I don't care about none of that. I have Jesus, so I got everything I need in him. And if he see fit to bless me with whatever he want me to have, it's going to happen, and can't nobody stop it. You can't stop it. I can't stop it. Can't nobody else stop it. But we have to learn not to hate on people, not to be jealous of people, but that ain't even that person. It's the enemy using that person. Like I said, when you talk to people and you just kind of talking to them, telling them different stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, why they even care so much, because, when we didn't have and my car got repoed and we was living with the lady from the church, yeah, I felt some type of way, but I said, God gonna bring me out, because he a miracle worker. And I'm gonna share that later when he lets me know it's okay to share how he's worked a miracle in a situation. But y'all, we gotta quit being jealous and quit hating on one another. happy for somebody when the Lord bless them. You get blessed with a new car. Say thank you, Jesus. Thank the Lord like that's your car. Because it just what He did for them, He can do it for you. But when you got hate in your heart, you hating on somebody, when you're jealous, that's blocking the way for you. Don't be jealous of nobody. God can work. He can work it out for you too. But you have to be happy for other people, because you don't know what people been praying for. You don't know what people been going through. And what look good ain't what you think. What you think you see ain't what you see. That person been struggling. That person been crying every night about that situation. And then they come to you and say, guess what? And then you like, yeah, you don't even need that. That's just another car note. How you gonna pay that? That's negativity. Don't nobody want to hear that. And they coming to you about how God don't bless them. Because if God open the door for them to receive something, He gonna make a way for them to maintain it. I promise you that. So as always, I pray you hear Jesus speaking through me and not just me. I pray you've had a beautiful, blessed day in the mighty name of Jesus. I love you, but remember, Jesus loves you so much more. The best is still yet to come for you and for me. God bless you. God keep you is my prayer. I pray you have been a blessing to somebody today. You were already blessed when Jesus woke you up this morning. Bye-bye. Thank you all for listening, for subscribing to this channel. I pray I'm always a blessing to you all, and you are definitely a blessing to me. Bye-bye.